Welcome to the Sleep Dives channel. Today, we're diving into a really incredible book, Thinking in Systems, by the brilliant Donella Meadows. Our goal here is to start seeing the world through a completely new perspective, what she calls the systems lens. It's a way to understand how all the complex patterns of our world, the good and the bad, actually come to be. So, let's get into it.
Now, Meadows kicks things off with this killer quote from Robert Pirsig, and it just hits the nail on the head. It gets right to the core of the problem, doesn't it? We spend so much time and energy trying to fix things by, changing the people in charge or shuffling the pieces around. But if we don't change the underlying structure, the very patterns of thought that created the problem in the first place, we just end up right back where we started. We all talk about the system, but what does that even mean?
To help us answer that, Meadows gives us this deceptively simple little thought experiment. She calls it the Slinky test, and it's designed to make us question everything we think we know about cause and effect. It really boils down to one fundamental question: where does behavior really come from?
Okay, so picture this. You're holding a slinky, right? One hand on top, the other supporting it from the bottom. Now you pull your bottom hand away. The slinky drops and it does its classic bouncy thing. So the question is, what made it do that? The obvious answer is, well, my hand did, I let it go. But is it really that simple? Let's test that theory. What happens if you do the exact same thing, but with the cardboard box the slinky came in? You let it go and it just hangs there. Nothing. Your hand did the exact same thing in both cases. The external force was identical. So what was different? The internal structure of the objects themselves. The slinky was built to bounce. That potential was always coiled up inside it. The box? Well, it was built to be a box. And right there, that is the central insight of systems theory. Think about it. Our actions don't really create behavior out of thin air. Instead, they suppress or, in this case, release a behavior that was already waiting to happen, a behavior that's latent within the system's own structure. That is a massive shift in thinking. The cause isn't just some outside event, it's the dance between that event and the system's own design. And if we take that slinky idea and we scale it up, we get to an even more profound point. A system's true nature is that it causes its own behavior. Over time, the patterns we see are generated from within the system itself. All right, and this is where it gets a bit challenging, maybe even a little uncomfortable. Because this way of thinking suggests that, political leaders don't single-handedly cause recessions. The boom and bust cycle is actually built into the very structure of a market economy. It says that a company that's losing market share isn't just a victim of tough competition. Its own policies probably created the vulnerability. It even reframes something as personal as drug addiction, seeing it not just as a personal failing, but as a behavior that emerges from a whole complex web of influences. In every case, the system itself is the source. So, here's a question. Why does this idea feel so revolutionary, but at the same time, kind of like common sense? Well, Meadows says it's because we're all walking around with two different ways of seeing the world, and they're constantly pulling at each other.
On one side, you've got a rational, analytical brain. This is what we're taught in school: how to break things down into little pieces, find a simple, direct cause for every effect, and, let's be honest, usually find someone or something to blame. But then, on the other side, there's our lived intuitive experience. Because we are systems. Our bodies, our families, our workplaces, they're all complex systems. So deep down, we instinctively get that things are interconnected, and rarely that simple. And that's what's so cool about this. Because we have that deep, gut-level understanding, systems thinking isn't really inventing anything new. It's more like it's giving us a new language, a formal structure, for wisdom we've had for centuries. You can see the connection so clearly. The fancy systems term feedback delays. The idea that the consequences of an action might not show up for a while, that's just a modern way of saying a stitch in time saves nine. Or the principle of competitive exclusion, where winners tend to keep on winning. That's just the rich get richer. Systems thinking is giving us a powerful new framework to understand timeless truths. Okay, so this is all really fascinating stuff, but here's the big question. How do we actually start using this lens in our day-to-day lives? How do we make this a practical tool and not just an interesting theory? Well, it all comes down to a really simple but profound shift in perspective. It's basically 3 steps. First, and this is the hardest one by far, we have to consciously stop asking, who's to blame?
That question is a trap. It keeps us looking for a simple external cause. Instead, we have to start asking a different question. What is it about the system that's producing this result over and over again? And third, we have to train ourselves to look for patterns over time, not just isolated single events.
Now, it's really important to get this next point. Meadows isn't saying we should just throw out detailed analysis and forget the facts. Not at all. The systems view isn't a replacement, it's a complement. We need both. And there's an ancient Sufi story that illustrates this idea perfectly. You've probably heard it. The story of the blind men and the elephant. A group of men who have never seen an elephant before touch one in a dark room. The one who touches the leg says it's a pillar. The one who feels the ear says, no, it's a large rug. The one holding the trunk says, you're both wrong, it's a pipe. Now, here's the thing. Each of them was perfectly correct about the part they were touching, but they were all completely wrong about the whole. They were missing the systems view that connects all the parts. So, as we wrap up this introduction, here are the foundational ideas to carry forward with you. 1. Remember the slinky. Behavior comes from structure. 2. This means the system itself is often the source of its own problems. And 3. Thinking in systems is what allows us to step back and finally see the whole elephant, not just its parts. And this is what's so incredibly empowering about this whole idea. Blaming an individual or some external event, it can leave us feeling pretty helpless. But understanding that the behavior comes from the structure, well, that puts the power back in our hands. Because once we can truly see the whole system, we can finally begin to find the courage and the wisdom to actually change it.